Welcome back to Her Kindle Stories, where we share real experiences from women who discovered that sometimes the strongest revenge is quiet dignity. Today's story comes from Shelley Armbruster, a 71-year-old woman who learned that when your own family locks you out, sometimes the best answer is to walk away and take your name with you. Before we dive into Shelley's unforgettable journey of sacrifice, rejection, and reclaiming her peace, remember that every story we share here represents the strength of women who refuse to stay broken. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because every day we bring you stories of women who turned their deepest pain into their greatest power. And while you're here, download your free ebook titled Healthy Boundaries After 60. How to set strong boundaries, saying no with grace, protecting your peace, and strengthening relationship with your children by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Now let's step into Shelley's world, where love, betrayal, and self-respect collide in ways her family never saw coming. I helped my son buy his dream house. My name was on the mortgage papers, and on the title, my savings were on the line. But when Christmas came, I was told not to come. That same night, I made a decision that changed everything I thought was fixed. My name is Shelley Armbruster. I'm 71 years old. I'm a widow. I live by myself on the east side of Springfield, Missouri, in a small one-story place with a narrow porch and a maple tree that drops leaves right into my flower beds. My days are simple. I'm up before the sun. I grind my coffee beans, put on the kettle, and sit at the kitchen table that my husband, Ray, built years ago. I read the local paper. I pay bills on the first of the month. On Tuesdays, I roll my trash can to the curb and wave to my neighbor across the street. On Sundays, I go to church, sit near the back, and hug the same 3 women I've hugged for years. It's quiet, and I do fine with quiet. I did not grow up with much, so I keep good records. My file cabinet has labels you can read at a glance: taxes, insurance, medical, house. And now, another drawer, Walter and Linda's house. Inside that, one of the copies I kept the day I helped them close on their mortgage. A cosigner isn't a small thing. You attach your good name and your credit to someone else's promise. The bank ran my numbers, the loan officer explained the risk, and I signed. The lender also wanted my name on the title to make the deal cleaner, so they added me as a joint owner. I did it because Walter is my only child, and because I believed a safe house for his family was worth the worry I would carry. The call came the first week of December. I had just finished sweeping the kitchen. My phone lit up with Linda's name. I stood there with the broom in my hand and answered. "Hi, Shelley," she said, bright and quick. "I wanted to talk about Christmas." "All right," I said. "What should I bring?" A little pause. "Actually," she said, "we're keeping it very small this year. Just us and the kids. We want a quiet holiday at home. Less stress." I let that sit. "I can keep things easy," I said. "I'll bring rolls and a pie. I'll be out of the way." Another pause. "It's not about food," she said. "It's just with everything going on, we need space. You understand." "Is Walter there?" I asked. "He's right here," she said. I could hear him, close enough to speak, far enough to stay silent. Then a quick shuffle, and his voice at last. "Hey, Mom," he said, "maybe we can do something after New Year's. It's just a lot right now." I looked at the clock on my stove. It read 2:17. I thought of the key on my ring that still opened the back door of their place. I thought of the binder on my shelf with the bank's logo across the top, my name printed next to theirs on the deed. "I do understand," I thought. "I understand exactly where I stand." "All right," I said. "I hear you. Merry Christmas." Then we hung up. I stood in the middle of my kitchen with the broom still in my hand. I wasn't angry in that loud way people expect. It was a small, heavy quiet that settled in my chest. I put the broom away wiped the counter, and made tea. I sat down and pulled the Walter and Linda's house file from the drawer. The top page was the settlement statement. I ran my finger down the lines until I found my name. There it was, as plain as day. Borrowers: Walter Armbruster and Linda Armbruster. Co-borrower/title holder: Shelley Armbruster. I thought about the day we signed those papers. Walter had been excited, bouncing his leg under the table like he used to when he was 10 and couldn't sit still in church. The house was pretty, I can't lie. Newly built, 3 bedrooms, a small office, a yard big enough for a swing set. The lender had said they were a bit tight on debt to income. With Shelley's strong credit and being added to title, "We can make this work," he'd said, tapping his pen. Walter squeezed my hand and said, "Thanks, Mom. We'll make you proud." I was proud. I was also careful. I asked questions, wrote down answers, and kept copies. I told myself it was temporary. In a year or 2, they could refinance and take my name off, and I would rest easier. It didn't happen. Life kept moving. And every month I watched my credit report list a mortgage I didn't live under. When their first tax bill came, I got a notice too, because owners get notices. I paid my own bills and tucked theirs into the drawer. I took another sip of tea and looked out my window at the maple tree. The light was going soft. A neighbor's dog barked at nothing. Across the street, a delivery van set down 2 boxes at a doorstep. People were getting ready for the holidays, stringing up lights, checking lists. I used to make big pans of casseroles and pack my trunk with gifts when Walter was small. We would drive to my mother's place 2 hours away. Family filled that little house to the corners. We ate ham off paper plates, and nobody cared if the rolls were a little dry. We were together. We were always together. This year, I wasn't invited to the house I helped them buy. "Just us and the kids," she said. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the settlement paper until it almost burned. People will say, "Oh, it's just one holiday." Maybe it is for them. For me, it was a clear sentence spoken after a lot of quiet ones. Over this last year, Linda made a habit of telling me after the fact. After they changed the kids' school, after they bought a second car, after they switched churches, I'd get a text with a picture and a caption that began with "FYI." When I did come by, Linda would walk me room to room like a polite realtor and then glance at her watch. Walter would ask if I needed anything, and then he'd go back to his computer. The kids would wave and go right back to their screens. Nothing cruel, just a steady push to the edge. I finished my tea and put the cup in the sink. Then I walked back to the table and made a short list in my notebook. I wrote 3 lines. What am I responsible for? What am I allowed to change? What brings me peace? I know some of you listening have made a promise that kept someone else afloat. You co-signed. You lent money. You let them move in. You babysat every week. You kept saying yes because that's what mothers do. If that's you, you can understand this next part without me dressing it up. I stared at my name on that deed until the words meant what they really meant. I am tied to a house where I am not welcome. So I called information and asked for the number of the title company. The woman on the line was kind. She gave me the number and the hours. Next, I opened my laptop, pulled up the bank's website, and looked for the refinance section. I wasn't about to do something wild. I was going to do something careful. My name got put on with signatures and forms. My name could come off with signatures and forms. There would be steps. I would take them one by one. That night, I set my alarm a little earlier than usual. I laid out a clean blouse, dark slacks, and my winter coat. I put the folder back in the drawer and clicked it shut. Then I turned off the kitchen light and stood for a moment in the dark, listening to the room settle. I felt my shoulders drop. I felt my jaw unclench. It was the same quiet as always, but it didn't sit heavy anymore. It felt like a door I could walk through. If you've ever been asked to stay away from a table you helped set, you know this feeling. You can type, "I know it," in the comments if you do. And if you don't, tell me why we let our names carry weight for people who won't carry us. I'm Shelley, and this is the year I stopped waiting for an invitation to a house that uses my name but not my chair. When I laid my clothes out that night, I thought back to the beginning, to when Walter was small, and I carried him on my hip while folding laundry. My husband, Ray, had passed away when I was only 52. A heart attack at work. One moment he was fine, and the next I was standing in a hospital hallway with a doctor telling me what couldn't be undone. Walter was 25 then, already working, but still my boy. Ray's absence left a hole so wide I felt it in everything. Bill's birthdays, supper at the table with only 2 chairs used instead of 3. I had no choice but to keep moving. I had a little sewing and alterations shop downtown. Nothing fancy. I hemmed pants, fixed zippers, let dresses in or out, and sometimes sewed curtains for new apartments. My hands stayed busy, and that busyness paid for the mortgage and groceries. Over time, the shop became my lifeline. The regulars knew me by name. They'd drop off their clothes, sit a minute, share news about their families. I kept a little jar on the counter with peppermint candies for kids. It wasn't riches, but it kept us steady, and it gave me a sense that I was still useful. Walter was kind back then. He helped me carry boxes when I needed them, drove me to church if the car gave me trouble, called most nights to check in. He dated here and there, but never settled long until Linda came along. She worked in marketing for a local company. She was smart, well-spoken, dressed sharp. From the first dinner we had together, I noticed how she spoke for both of them. Walter would start to answer a question, and she'd finish his sentence. He didn't seem to mind, but I noticed. Linda was polite in the way someone is polite, because it's expected. Her smile never warmed her eyes. She'd thank me for the meal, but push the dish aside with barely a taste. She'd say things like, "Oh, Shelley, that's so old-fashioned," when I brought up something I'd read in the paper or when I suggested baking together for the holidays. None of it was openly cruel, just enough to make me feel like I was a guest in conversations I should have been part of. When they married, I told myself to step back and let them build their life. That's what parents do. I babysat when asked, baked cakes for birthdays, and kept my phone close when the grandkids were sick. I made casseroles and pies, the same ones Ray had loved, hoping they'd become traditions in the new family. Sometimes they ate them, sometimes not. Linda once told me, "We're moving more plant-based." But thank you, and set my dish on the far edge of the counter. I remember driving home that night with the pie plate still full on the seat beside me. Holidays were a mix of invitations and silences. The first Christmas after their wedding, I was there, and we exchanged gifts around a small tree. I bought Linda a scarf, soft and pretty, and she thanked me, but never wore it once after. I noticed. The second Christmas, the invitation came late, almost an afterthought. I showed up with cookies, and Linda said, "Oh, the kids don't need more sugar, but thank you." The third Christmas, no invite came at all. When I asked Walter, he said they were traveling. I found out later from a neighbor that they had been at home all along. That was the first time I understood how decisions in that house were made. Still, I tried to stay close. I offered to drive the kids to soccer practice, but Linda said another parent had it covered. I suggested a weekend trip to the lake, like Ray and I had once done with Walter, but Linda said they were too busy. Every offer I made found its way to the maybe later pile, which usually meant never. Walter didn't argue. He nodded along and went with whatever Linda said. I didn't hold it against him the way some might. I knew men who needed peace in their homes would rather stay quiet than start fights. I recognized that in my son, but his silence still hurt. It meant my voice carried less weight in his life than it once did. When the grandkids were small, I'd get to rock them, sing old lullabies, and watch their eyes close heavy. As they got older, their world filled with devices and sports and friends. They'd wave when I came by, but go right back to their screens. Kids are kids, I told myself. But underneath, I wondered if they were learning to treat me the way they saw their mother treat me, cordial but distant. At my sewing shop, I'd listen to other women my age talk about Sunday dinners with grown children and grandkids gathered around. They'd complain about too much noise, too many dishes. I'd nod and smile, but a part of me longed for that chaos. My house was quiet, and I filled the silence with work, crosswords, and church socials. Walter did check in now, and then he'd call about the kids' birthdays or text pictures of their soccer medals. But his words were clipped, rushed, like a man already halfway back to his to-do list. It wasn't the boy who once called me from his college dorm to tell me he couldn't figure out how to use the washing machines. Linda, for her part, kept things efficient. She sent me group texts with updates, photos, sometimes links to their new purchases, a patio set, a grill, a new SUV. It was as if she was saying, "Look how well we're doing." Rarely did she ask me to visit, and when she did, it was more obligation than invitation. I held on, though. I told myself families go through phases. Kids grow, get busy, come back around later. I prayed for patience. I kept showing up with gifts, kept offering help. Because that's what mothers do. They keep the door open. But when Linda's call came this December, telling me not to come for Christmas, the picture sharpened. It wasn't a phase. It was a pattern. And I was no longer just a mother trying to stay involved. I was a co-signer on a house I didn't belong to, holding risk for people who didn't want my presence but wanted my name on paper. I closed the notebook that night and looked at Ray's old photograph on the shelf. His smile was still steady, the same one that once told me, "You'll always know what to do." For the first time in years, I felt that he might be right. The year Walter came to me about the house, I remember the way he showed up at my front door. He was standing there with papers in his hand and hope all over his face. He hadn't looked that nervous since he was a teenager asking if he could borrow the car. "Mom," he said, "we found a place. It's perfect. The schools are good. The kids will have their own rooms. There's even a little office for Linda." But he stopped, rubbed the back of his neck. I waited. I've learned that silence makes people finish their own sentences. "We can't qualify," he said. "Finally, the bank said we're just a little short. My income looks fine, but with Linda's car loan and her student debt, our ratios don't pass. They said if we had a co-signer with strong credit, it would clear everything." I didn't say anything right away. He filled the silence again. "Mom, we've been renting for 8 years. The rent keeps climbing. The kids share a room. This house is only 15 minutes from work. It's new construction. If you just sign with us, we can do this." I asked the obvious question. "What if you can't make the payments?" "We can," he said quickly. "We've been running the numbers. Between my salary and Linda's, we're fine. The bank said we'd only need your name on the loan, maybe the title, just to make it clean. You'd never have to pay a dime." I looked at him and saw that same boy who once asked me for help with his homework, who once stood on the porch in his first suit for prom. He was my son, my only child. How do you say no when your child tells you they've found a home for their family and you're the key? I did not agree that night. I told him I needed time. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table with my ledger and calculator. I checked my savings. I had my retirement accounts, the little pension from the sewing shop, and Ray's life insurance money I had carefully protected. Enough to keep me secure, not enough to be reckless. The next week, Walter called again. Mom, please. This means everything. Linda loves the kitchen. The kids already picked out which bedrooms they want. I promise you, we'll never put you at risk. I told him I would go to the meeting with the bank and hear it for myself. The loan officer sat across from us at a wide desk, tapping on his keyboard. He explained it all in detail. Walter and Linda's combined debt to income was too high for the loan amount. My credit score was in the 780s. My history was clean, 30 years of on-time payments. With you on the loan, Mrs. Armbruster, this will move forward. And, he added, for recording purposes, we'll need your name added to the title. That way, everything is consistent. I asked what would happen if they defaulted. He was clear. You'd be liable. The bank would look to you. I remember pressing my palms against my knees, steadying myself. Walter jumped in. That won't happen, Mom. I swear. We've budgeted. We've got this. The officer slid the papers across. I picked up the pen. I thought about Ray, how he always said, our boy deserves a good start. I thought about the grandkids sharing a room in a cramped rental. I thought about Christmas mornings in a place that would be theirs. I signed. A few weeks later, we were all at the closing table. Linda wore a new blazer and had her nails done, neat and glossy. Walter bounced his leg under the table, like he always did when he was excited. The stack of papers seemed endless, promissory notes, truth in lending forms, title affidavits. My hand cramped from signing, but each time I signed, I told myself, this is for family. At one point, the settlement officer slid a page across with bold letters at the top, warranty deed. Below, 3 names, Walter Armbruster, Linda Armbruster, and Shelley Armbruster. My name right there. I paused just a moment before I signed. That pause stayed with me, like my hand knew more than my heart. When the keys slid across the table, Walter grinned like a boy again. Mom, you don't know how much this means. You've saved us. Linda smiled too, polite as always, but her eyes flickered, like she'd rather not have needed me at all. That weekend, I walked through the house with them. It was nice. Open floor plan, granite counters, brand new carpet. The kids ran from room to room, calling out which would be theirs. I watched them and told myself it was worth it. Every signature, every worry was worth it for that joy. But when I got back to my little house, I sat down at my desk and added a new folder to my cabinet, Walter and Linda's house. Inside, I placed every copy the bank gave me. I told myself it was just good record keeping. Deep down, I knew it was protection. Every month after, I saw the loan appear on my credit report. Every tax season, the statements arrived with my name on them. I paid my own bills, but those documents reminded me I was tied to their choices. I told no one at church, none of my friends. It felt private, like something I had to keep in the family. And when people asked how Walter was doing, I'd smile and say, "Oh, they've just bought a new house. It's beautiful." Inside, I carried the weight of it. I carried the knowledge that if anything went wrong, it would fall on me. I loved my son. I wanted him secure. I wanted the grandchildren to have stability. But even in those first months, a thought kept circling in my mind like a slow clock. I was the safety net again. It wasn't the first time, and part of me knew it wouldn't be the last. At first, I thought the new house would bring us closer. I imagined Sunday dinners around their bigger table, birthdays in the backyard, maybe even Christmas mornings where the grandkids could run down their own staircase. For a while, it looked like that might happen. They invited me over the first few weekends, showing me the kitchen, the deck, the shiny appliances. Walter kept saying, "Can you believe this is ours?" He was proud, and I was glad to see it, but slowly I noticed the change. It wasn't sudden, more like a slow fade. The calls that used to come once a week stretched to every other week. Then just a text. Kids had a game. Busy with work. Polite words that closed the door without saying no outright. When I did stop by, Linda always looked surprised, like I'd shown up without warning, even when I called first. She'd answer the door with a smile that never reached her eyes and say, "Oh, Shelley, come in," as if she were greeting a neighbor instead of family. I tried not to let it bother me. I'd bring casseroles or banana bread, just like I always had. But Linda would glance at the dish and say, "We're trying to eat cleaner, more plant-based now." She'd set it aside, untouched. One time she added, "Shelley, some of those old recipes really aren't healthy anymore." I laughed politely, but the words stuck. Old, outdated, out of place. At dinners, the conversations seemed to flow right around me. Walter and Linda talked about work projects, apps I didn't know, trips they planned with friends. The kids would sit with their tablets, barely lifting their eyes. If I tried to share a story, something from the shop, or from when Walter was little, Linda would interrupt. "That's not how it happened, is it, Walter?" she'd ask, half smiling. Walter would shrug, not correcting her, not defending me either. One Sunday, they had me over for supper. They served salmon with a glaze I couldn't pronounce, couscous, and a salad with seeds I'd never seen before. I ate quietly, trying not to fumble with the small fork Linda insisted was the right one. She explained where each recipe came from, as if she were teaching a class. When the talk shifted to new furniture they were buying, I mentioned how Ray and I once saved up for our oak table. Linda gave a tight laugh and said, "Well, styles change, Shelley. That heavy look is out now." I swallowed my bite and nodded. Birthdays became another reminder. For Walter's birthday, I brought a cake I baked from scratch, just like every year. When I carried it in, Linda looked at the box and said, "Oh, we already ordered one from that new bakery. But thank you." My cake sat on the counter untouched the whole night. They sent it home with me in the same box I carried it in. For my own birthday, I waited all day. I thought maybe the kids would call, or Walter would stop by. Nothing. By evening, I gave up, made myself tea, and went to bed early. The next morning, I found a text that had come late at night. "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope it was good." No call, no card, just that. I started to realize that my presence was more tolerated than welcomed. When I offered to babysit, Linda would say, "Thanks, but we've got it." If I suggested helping with school projects, she'd respond, "We already have a plan." Every offer I made was met with a polite wall. It's hard to describe the way that eats at you. You don't get yelled at or turned away outright. Instead, you get the sense that you're extra, an add-on, someone they don't need but can't quite get rid of. That's how it felt, like I was slowly being pushed to the edges of their life. Meanwhile, the loan weighed on me. Every month, I saw the statement with my name on it. I kept a close eye on my credit report, making sure the payments were always on time. They were, but the risk hung over me. I'd lie awake some nights thinking, what if Walter loses his job? What if they fall behind? What if I end up paying for a house I'm not even welcome in? Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to stir up trouble. I didn't want to be the nagging mother who kept reminding them of her sacrifice. I told myself it was just a season, that families have ups and downs, that I should be grateful Walter had a home at all. But deep inside, I knew the truth. I wasn't part of that home, not really. My name was on the deed, but my chair was missing at the table. And that truth grew heavier with each polite smile, each cold remark, each holiday where my phone stayed silent. I tried to hold on by showing up with little things, soup when the kids had colds, cookies for school bake sales, small gifts just to remind them I cared. Sometimes they accepted, sometimes they waved me off. I kept telling myself not to give up, not to stop trying. But the gap between us kept stretching wider. And through it all, I carried the burden quietly. The papers in my cabinet reminded me every day I had tied myself to a house I didn't belong to. I was their safety net, even as they pulled further and further away. If you've ever sat at a table and felt like you weren't really wanted there, click like and subscribe to this channel so we can find each other. If you won't, tell me honestly in the comments, have you ever made someone feel this way without noticing? By the time December came around, I had convinced myself that this Christmas would be different. They'd been in the house a full year now. The furniture was set, the curtains hung, the yard landscaped. The grandkids had bedrooms of their own, decorated with posters and shelves. Surely now, with the house settled, they'd want me there to celebrate. After all, Christmas is about family, and wasn't I family? I baked early that week, just to feel prepared. A pecan pie, the same recipe my mother had passed down to me, sat cooling on my counter. I set aside my small stash of gift money for the grandkids. Nothing big, just thoughtful things. A book for my granddaughter, a warm sweater for my grandson. In my mind, I pictured Christmas morning. The tree lit, the grandkids unwrapping my gifts, Walter smiling, and maybe even Linda softening a little. I wanted to believe it. Then the phone rang. It was early afternoon, and I saw Linda's name on the screen. I picked up quickly, thinking maybe she was calling to plan the menu. "Hi, Shelley," she said. Her voice was bright, but rehearsed. I wanted to talk about Christmas. I smiled into the phone. Yes, I was just about to ask what I should bring. She paused. "Actually, this year we've decided to keep things really simple. Just us and the kids. We want a quiet holiday at home." I stood there, my pie cooling, my gifts already wrapped in brown paper on the table. "Oh," I said slowly, "I can make it easy. I'll just bring rolls and sit with you." "It's not about food," she said quickly. "It's just with everything going on, we need space. I hope you understand." The words sat heavy. I asked, "Is Walter there?" There was a shuffle, and then I heard his voice. "Hey, Mom, are you really not doing Christmas with me this year?" I asked. He hesitated. "Maybe we can see you after New Year's. It's just a lot right now." That was all. Short. Final. I felt the air leave my chest. I wanted to remind him that the only reason he was even in that house was because of me. My name had signed the papers. My credit had carried the weight. My savings had been tied up for their security. But in that moment, I realized none of that mattered to them. "All right," I said softly. "I hear you. Merry Christmas then." There was a pause on the other end, then a quick, "Thanks, Mom," before the line clicked dead. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the pie. The maple tree outside had lost all its leaves, and its bare branches scratched against the window. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I thought about all the times I had packed gifts into my car, driven through snowstorms, carried food into other people's kitchens. I thought about the years of showing up, even when I wasn't asked. And now, I wasn't even welcome. I wasn't angry in the shouting way. It was something smaller, sharper. A realization that family in their house didn't include me. I walked over to my cabinet and pulled open the drawer labeled Walter and Linda's house. Inside was the folder with every paper from the closing. The deed was right on top. My name printed as plain as day alongside theirs. The ink hadn't faded, the lines hadn't blurred. On paper, I was part of that home. In life, I was erased. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook open. I wrote one sentence across the top of the page. If I am not welcome in their home, why is my name still tied to it? I looked around my little house. It was small, but it was mine. Every bill was in my name. Every corner carried a piece of me. Ray's photograph on the shelf, the quilt I stitched draped across the couch, the clock ticking steady in the hallway. My home knew me, even if theirs did not. I thought of Walter's voice on the phone, so quiet behind Linda's. I thought of Linda's words, just us and the kids. They hadn't said it outright, but I heard the truth. I wasn't part of their us. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, neighbors were stringing up Christmas lights. Their ladders leaned against gutters, their kids laughing as they tested bulbs. I watched and felt something settle in me. I had spent too many years waiting to be included, too many holidays hoping for a chair at a table that never seemed to have space for me. I sipped my tea and looked back down at the deed. My name was there, but my presence wasn't. And that night, I promised myself something. I would never again carry the burden of a house where I wasn't wanted. They thought they had closed the door on me. They didn't know I was about to open another. After that phone call, I didn't turn on the television. I didn't put on music. I just let the quiet sit in the house with me. It gave me space to think back on everything I had poured into Walter's life. When Ray passed away, I was left with a 25-year-old son, still trying to find his footing. He was working part-time jobs, figuring out what he wanted to do. I carried the weight of bills, insurance, and the shop. I told myself I had to keep strong for him, that if I crumbled, he'd have nothing to lean on. There were years when I stretched a single paycheck farther than I thought possible. I'd buy fabric scraps and turn them into aprons or quilts to sell on the side. I clipped coupons, packed lunches, and kept the heat low in winter to save a few dollars on the gas bill. My friends went out to restaurants. I stayed home, counted coins, and reminded myself it was all so Walter could move forward without stumbling over the same struggles I had faced. I remembered the day he got accepted into college. He was sitting at the table with the letter in his hand, eyes wide. "Mom, I got in," he said, almost whispering it. I hugged him so tight, he laughed. But the truth was, I didn't have money set aside for tuition. So I picked up extra hours at the shop, worked Saturdays, and did alterations late into the night. Some weeks I sewed until my fingers were sore. Still, I paid the bills, bought his books, and made sure he didn't have to quit before he even started. I promised him then, the same way I had when he was a little boy and scared during thunderstorms, that I would always make sure he had a place to land. "You'll always have a home," I told him. And I meant it. That promise guided me through decades. It's why I said yes when he came with that mortgage paperwork. But sitting at my kitchen table now, I realized how far that promise had been stretched. It had turned me into an invisible cosigner, useful on paper, disposable in life. The more I thought about it, the more it stung. My name carried weight with the bank, but not with my son or his wife. They needed me for signatures, not for Christmas. They leaned on my credit, not my company. They cashed in on my reliability, but closed their doors to my presence. I thought of all the little sacrifices along the way, the vacations I never took because I was saving for him, the car I drove into the ground, patching it up year after year instead of replacing it because he needed extra money during school. The times I stayed home instead of buying myself something new. I wasn't bitter then. I told myself it was part of being a mother. But now, those sacrifices looked different. They looked like bricks I had laid one by one, building a house I wasn't even allowed to step into. The more I thought, the clearer my question became. Why am I carrying this burden if I'm unwanted? I stared at that deed again. The letters of my name printed neatly beside Walter's and Linda's. That single sheet of paper meant that if they stopped paying tomorrow, the bank would come to me. If their jobs dried up, if they overspent, if life hit them hard, it would fall on me. Yet when Christmas came, I wasn't welcome in the very house my name secured. I pressed my palms flat against the table. The wood was cool, steady. My whole life, I had kept promises. To my husband, to my son, to customers at my shop. I had lived careful, honest, and dependable. And now I was being treated like a piece of furniture, there but not needed, not valued. I thought about Walter as a boy, maybe 9 years old, standing in the doorway of our old house after he'd had a nightmare. His small voice said, "Mom, don't ever leave." I picked him up, carried him back to bed, and told him, "You'll always have me, always." And I kept that promise. But as I sat there now, I wondered if promises should still hold when they're used against you. For years, I accepted being the quiet support. I told myself it was enough to see Walter succeed, enough to watch the grandkids grow from a distance. I thought my love could fill in all the gaps. But that phone call changed something. It pulled the cover off the truth I had been trying to ignore. I wasn't just left out of a holiday. I was erased from a family I had helped build. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just felt a steady sense of awakening. I saw clearly for the first time that I had given and given, and in return, I had been set aside. I asked myself, what would Ray tell me if he were sitting here? I could almost hear his voice, low and certain. "Shelley, you don't have to hold up the whole world alone. Not anymore." That's when the seed planted itself. If they could close their doors to me, I could close my folder on them. Not in anger, but in clarity. It was the first time I let myself imagine a life where I wasn't tied to that house. A life where my security wasn't sitting on papers in a drawer with other people's names beside mine. A life where I no longer carried the burden of a family that didn't want my presence but wanted my signature. That thought didn't scare me. It gave me peace. And once the thought arrived, I knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it. Once that thought took root, that I didn't have to stay tied to their house, it kept circling back, no matter how I tried to distract myself. I'd sit with my coffee in the morning, open the paper, and find myself staring out the window instead, thinking about that folder with my name on papers that no longer felt right. I knew I needed guidance. I wasn't about to rush into something without understanding the steps. That's when I thought of my old friend, Denise. We'd known each other for years. She used to bring her kids' school uniforms to my shop when I was still working. Denise had gone into real estate later in life, first as an agent, then doing some property consulting. If anyone could give me a straight answer, it was her. I called and asked if she'd like to meet for lunch. We picked a small diner near the courthouse, a place where we both liked the chicken salad sandwiches. We slid into the booth, ordered our food, and after some small talk, I pulled the folder from my bag and laid it on the table between us. Her eyebrows lifted. "This looks official." "It is," I said. "It's Walter and Linda's mortgage. I co-signed last year. My name is on the deed." And now, I hesitated, then said the words I had only spoken to myself. "Now, I'm not even welcome in their house for Christmas. I want to know what my options are." Denise opened the folder carefully, flipping through the pages. She nodded as she read. "Yes, you're on title. That makes you a co-owner, even if you're not living there." "So what does that mean?" I asked. "It means you share responsibility. If they default, you're liable. But it also means you have rights. You can't just walk away, but you're not stuck forever either. If they refinance, they can take you off the loan and the deed. Or, if they sold, the new owner would replace you on the paperwork. But right now, unless one of those things happens, your name keeps you tied." I sat back, letting her words sink in. "So I can ask them to refinance?" "You can request it," she said. "The bank may allow them to restructure if they qualify on their own. But you'll need to start the process, file a release request, get the lender to review. It won't be instant, but it's possible." I sipped my iced tea, steadying myself. What if they don't want to? Denise looked me straight in the eye. Then you'll have to decide how far you're willing to push. But Shelley, you don't owe anyone your credit. If they want independence, they should carry it themselves. I felt something loosen inside me. I had walked in heavy, but her words felt like a small door opening. That afternoon, I drove straight to the bank. I walked into the lobby with my folder under my arm. The loan officer I met with was a young man, polite but rushed. I explained that I was a co-signer, that I wanted to know what steps could remove my name. He typed on his computer, asked for my ID, and pulled up the account. "Yes, ma'am," he said, scanning the screen. "You're on both the note and the deed. If the primary borrowers refinance, your name can be removed. We'd need their cooperation for that. And if they don't cooperate," I asked, "then the liability remains. But you can certainly file a formal request to begin the process. It would at least put the matter on record." He slid a form across the desk. I read it slowly, then tucked it into my folder. "Thank you," I said. On the drive home, I thought about everything Denise and the loan officer had said. My whole life, I'd been the steady one, the one who never broke promises. But I realized something that day. I had been keeping everyone else safe while letting my own peace crumble. I had become their insurance policy, even while they treated me like an afterthought. That night, I made myself a pot of vegetable soup and ate it slowly, thinking it through. By the time I washed the dishes, I knew I wasn't doing this out of anger. I wasn't doing it to get even. I was doing it because it was time to reclaim what was mine, my peace of mind. I pulled my notebook from the counter and wrote a new sentence across the top of the page. I gave them security. Now I'll give myself peace. The next week, I gathered everything I needed. Copies of the mortgage, the deed, the release form from the bank. I put them all in the folder, added a fresh notepad, and slid a pen inside. I even bought a small planner to track calls and dates. If this was going to take time, I wanted a record. One evening, as I sorted papers, I noticed Walter's name typed right above mine on the deed. The boy I once promised a home now had a home because of me, but he had also turned me into a name on a page, nothing more. Seeing it in print no longer hurt. It clarified things. I realized I didn't need to confront him with anger. I didn't need to explain myself over and over. The paperwork would speak for me. The bank would speak for me. And when it was done, my name would no longer hold up walls where I wasn't wanted. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Not because the problem was solved, but because I finally believed it could be. I had a plan, and I had the courage to follow it. If you've ever had to reclaim your peace by finally saying no, hit subscribe. And if you can't bring yourself to, at least tell me in the comments, what's holding you back from choosing yourself for once? Christmas Eve came, and the air carried that mix of cold wind and wood smoke. For the first time in years, I didn't spend the day baking or wrapping last-minute gifts. I dressed in my best winter coat, slipped my folder into my bag, and drove downtown to the bank. The lobby was quiet. A few employees were packing up early, ready to go home to their own families. I sat across from a loan officer and slid the papers across his desk. "I want to file this release," I said. My voice was steady. He scanned the form and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. This will start the process. We'll notify the primary borrowers that they'll need to refinance if they want to keep the loan active without you." I signed my name carefully, each stroke of the pen feeling like a step forward. When I stood, I thanked him and walked out into the cold. For once, I didn't feel heavy. I felt lighter than I had in years. That night, while families across town gathered around trees, I lit one small candle on my kitchen table. I sat with a cup of tea and whispered to myself, I did it! Not out of anger, but out of peace. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Walter's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Mom," he said, his voice tight, "I just got a letter from the bank. What's going on?" I asked to have my name removed. I told him plainly. "You can't just do that," he said quickly. "We need you on the loan. Without you, they're making us refinance. Do you know what kind of pressure this puts us under?" I held the phone close, steady. "I know exactly what it means, Walter. It means you'll carry your own mortgage like every other homeowner. It means I won't be tied to a house where I'm not welcome." There was a pause. I could hear him exhale. "This isn't fair, Mom. We've made every payment. We've done everything right. Then you should have no trouble qualifying on your own." I replied, "You and Linda have good jobs. The bank told me this is possible. All you have to do is step up." His tone shifted, almost pleading. "Why now? Why would you do this right at Christmas?" I thought of Linda's voice on the phone weeks earlier, saying, "Just us and the kids." I thought of the gifts I had wrapped that still sat in the corner of my living room, unopened. Because Christmas made it clear, I said softly, "Family means everyone but me in your house. If I'm not welcome at your table, I shouldn't be tied to your deed." That's not bitterness, Walter. That's clarity. He was quiet for a long time. Then, his voice lower, he said, "Linda isn't happy about this." "I imagine she isn't," I said, "but Linda has made plenty of decisions where I wasn't included. This one is mine." That night, Linda called me directly. Her voice was sharper than Walter's. "Shelley, this is outrageous. Do you know how much stress you're causing us? We'll have to jump through hoops with the bank. And rates are higher now. We never missed a payment. You're punishing us for no reason." I let her finish, then said calmly, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself. I gave you security when you needed it. Now, I'm giving myself peace. You have your home. You have each other. You don't need me on your papers anymore." She huffed. "You've made things harder, Shelley. That's all you've done." "Maybe," I said, "but harder isn't the same as impossible. You'll manage. You always do." She hung up without another word. I sat in my kitchen afterward, watching the steam rise from my tea. I thought about how different the evening felt compared to past holidays. For once, I wasn't pacing or wishing I'd been invited. I wasn't staring at a silent phone. I had acted for myself, and that was enough. A week later, Walter called again. His voice was calmer this time. "The bank says we can refinance. It's going to be tight, but they think we'll pass. They're running the numbers now." "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "Mom," he paused, "you really mean it, don't you? You're not changing your mind." "I've thought long and hard about this," I answered. "And no, I'm not changing my mind. This isn't about anger, Walter. It's about finally drawing a line. I've spent my life carrying others. It's time I carry only myself." He sighed. "Linda's still upset." "I expected that," I said gently, "but you'll both move forward. And I'll move forward too." After we hung up, I felt no guilt, no regret, only calm. When the refinance finally went through, I received a packet in the mail confirming the change. My name was no longer on the mortgage. The deed had been updated. I opened the envelope, read the words twice, and then set it down on my table. I whispered to myself, "Free." I didn't celebrate with champagne or make a big announcement. I simply tucked the confirmation into my file cabinet under a new label, "Closed." For the first time in years, I no longer carried their weight. And the beauty of it was that I hadn't done it to hurt them. I had done it to heal myself. I gave them security when they needed it most. Now, I finally gave myself something better, peace. Once the papers came in the mail and I saw my name officially off the loan, something in me shifted. I no longer woke up with that knot of worry in my stomach. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without thinking about someone else's debt sitting on my shoulders. I wasn't tied to a house that had no room for me. With that new freedom, I started to think about what I wanted for myself. I didn't need a big house. I wanted something manageable, something I could truly call mine without any strings attached. After looking for a few weeks, I found a small condo on the south side of town. 2 bedrooms, just enough space for me and a guest. The windows faced the sunrise, and the kitchen had room for the oak table Ray built decades ago. When I signed those papers, it felt different. My name was the only one on the deed. No shared liability, no conditions, no silent partner waiting to cut me out. Just me. I moved in with boxes filled with quilts, photo albums, and the dishes I had carried through every chapter of my life. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and it was mine. I settled into a rhythm. I reconnected with a few friends from church and joined the quilting circle again. We met every Thursday evening, sewing and talking about everything under the sun. Health scares, recipes, grandchildren. It felt good to be among women who understood what it meant to keep going, no matter what. On quiet mornings, I began writing. At first, just in a notebook. Thoughts about aging, about family, about the weight women carry in silence. Then I typed a few of those pieces on my computer and shared them in a small online group for older women. To my surprise, people responded. "This is exactly what I needed to hear," one woman wrote. Another said, "I thought I was the only one going through this." That gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just letting go of my past burden. I was turning it into something useful for others. Each post I wrote was a reminder that setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop loving your family. It means you love yourself enough to stop being used. It took Walter a while, but eventually he called. His voice was softer this time. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "I'm well," I said. "I've moved into my new place." There was a pause. "I heard. The kids told me. They said you have big windows and a quilt on the wall." "That's true," I said. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I know things have been tense. I just want you to know I'm not angry. It was a lot for us, but we're managing." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied. I didn't fill the silence with apologies or explanations. I kept it cordial, steady. What mattered more to me was that the grandchildren started calling on their own. My granddaughter phoned to tell me about her art project. My grandson called one Saturday morning just to ask if I remembered how to make chocolate chip pancakes. Those calls reminded me that my bond with them didn't depend on a house or on Linda's permission. It lived in the space I made for them, and in the love they knew I had for them, no matter what. I didn't cut Walter off. I didn't hold grudges. I simply drew the line and stayed firm. When we spoke, I was polite, but I didn't let the conversation drift into guilt or pressure. He knew where I stood. My condo became my safe place. I decorated simply, quilts folded on the couch, books stacked neatly by my chair, a few plants by the window. Every corner reminded me of one truth. I had reclaimed myself. Sometimes, in the evening, I'd sit at my desk with the lamp on low and write letters I never sent. To Ray, telling him how I kept going. To Walter, telling him I hoped he'd one day understand. To myself, reminding me that peace is something you don't beg for. You build it. As the months passed, I saw how one decision changed everything. I hadn't just removed my name from a deed. I had removed myself from being an invisible safety net. I had stepped back into my own life. And now I'll turn to you. Have you ever given everything to family, only to be shut out when it mattered most? Have you ever carried someone else's burden, only to realize they didn't value the weight you held for them? What would you have done in my place? If you've ever been uninvited from a table you helped build, subscribe. Because stories like mine aren't rare. We just don't always talk about them. And if you wouldn't have done what I did, tell me, would you have taken your name off the deed? Like, share, and subscribe. And let's talk about it in the comments. Because maybe the real lesson here isn't just about houses and loans. Maybe it's about learning, even late in life, that peace of mind is worth protecting. Always. Lastly, download your free ebook titled Healthy Boundaries After 60. How to Set Strong Boundaries, Saying No with Grace, Protecting Your Peace, and Strengthening Relationship with Your Children by clicking the link in the pinned comment.